Hi, and welcome to Chapter 11. I was remiss in that I thought I had done these videos, and I hadn't done these videos, so better late than never, I suppose. And in Chapter 11, what we're going to look at are classifying goods. Up until this point in the course, what we've looked at are private goods. Private goods have a demand curve. Private goods have a supply curve. In a demand curve, we know that we pay according to our willingness to pay. And in the supply curve, that is consisting of the costs to those that are supplying it. In this chapter, what we're going to do is move beyond private goods to talk about goods that don't have a demand curve and don't have a supply curve. And yet they're goods which we want to have in our society. Now, some of us place different values on these types of things. For example, a public park. If you are asked to pay for it, would you pay for it? And so we kind of talk about those particular types of goods. So we're going to run into three specific goods. There's four in total. We've already studied private goods. They have a demand and supply curve attached to them. You haven't studied, though, public goods, nor have you studied common resources. And we talk a little bit about club goods when I did the introduction to the different types of industries that are out there, and I called them natural monopolies. So club goods, natural monopolies, the same thing. So the first thing that we want to do in this chapter is to do this first objective, which looks at how to classify a good. How do you know if it's a common resource? How do you know if it's a private good? And then what we're going to do is focus on the two that are kind of unique to our system. We're going to leave monopolies off to the side. In that case, club goods. We're going to talk about those a little bit more in the monopoly chapter, and we'll call them natural monopolies. But we're going to explore more deeply common resources and public goods. Okay, so without further ado, let me share my slides with you, and we'll go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so let me share my screen. And share. There we go. Okay. So again, our first objective is how do we classify goods? And our little introduction here basically says the best things in life are free. But we know that's a loaded statement for an economist because we don't believe anything in life is free. Everything has an opportunity cost attached to it. But there are some products which are seemingly free, or some goods. So in this example, we're going to say it's difficult in this because there's no allocation to markets. And what exactly does that mean? It means for these products, let's see, color, okay, there is no demand curve. There is no supply curve. So is there a willingness to pay then? And why would people supply this if there's no incentive or profitability? Okay, so they're available free of charge. And we're noticing what's happened of late is that we're starting to place a charge on these things. So I like to use the example of Silver Beach. And I'm going to talk about when I was younger. So Silver Beach was free. You could pull up right to the beach. There was no cost. And so a lot of people would come and enjoy the beach. But the problem is maintaining it and those kinds of things. Who was really maintaining it? The residents of St. Joe. Okay. So basically the residents were paying for others' enjoyment. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We call that the tragedy of the commons. So private markets cannot ensure that the good is produced or consumed in the proper amount. Some people might consume more than others, and they're not actually paying for it. Okay, so what does the government do? The government comes in to remedy this market failure. So these particular products that we're talking about are a market failure. Remember, a market failure is we can't get to quantity equilibrium. Also, total surplus is not maximized. So these are market failures, much like externalities were market failures as well. Okay? So the government kind of treats these things in the same categories. And this is why we put this content right next to the chapter on externalities, chapter 10. Okay, so let's look at how we classify different goods. We're going to ask two questions. And the first question we're going to ask ourselves is this good excludable? Now, what does excludability mean? There we go. It means that we can prevent someone from using it. Now, the easiest way to prevent someone from using something is to attach a price to it. And that's kind of creating a market, isn't it? So, is the good excludable? Can we prevent someone from using it? You might think in your mind, you might say, hey, I have to get a license to hunt. I have to get a license to fish. That's an excludability feature. And many times there's a price attached to that, which we could argue whether or not that is a good thing, because it means that it's not available to all people. Okay, let's jump back and look at our next question that we want to ask ourselves. The second question that we want to ask when classifying a particular good is we want to know, is this good rival in consumption? Now, what rival in consumption means is one person's use means there's less to go around. Okay, so that one might be a little more difficult to understand. So when we're talking about rival in consumption, imagine there are you and I, okay, two people, and I happen to bring 2 donuts to our meeting. You consume 2. You take 2. Automatically, by default, that means I don't get one. So when you think about this idea, remember all resources are scarce. And so it goes along very well with what we talk about in rival in consumption. Truthfully, everything is rival in consumption. Right now, with the coronavirus, if you go down and you buy more than your allotment of toilet paper, it automatically means that the next consumer may not have toilet paper available to buy. And that's why we step in and put limits on things. So in this example, and let me go ahead back to my slide here. What we're talking about is that if one person uses it or uses it too much, maybe that's a better way to just look at it. So one person's overuse, this is why hoarding is a problem right now. Means there's less to go around. So you can see rival in consumption right now in some particular areas, ventilators, okay? Also masks, surgical masks, right? There's not enough to go around. So just really seeing these ideas that are rival in consumption at the current time. Okay. Oops, let me erase my slides here. Okay. So the 2 questions we ask, is it excludable and is it rival? So those are going to be the 2-prong test to decide what they are going to be. Now, if a good is excludable, then again, we can prevent someone from using it. If it's rival, one person's use means there's less to go around. So here are 4 types of goods. Okay, so we have private goods, and private goods are going to be excludable because they have a price attached to them. And they're going to be rival in consumption. One person's use precludes someone else's. Public goods are non-excludable. That's why it's difficult for us to create or to gauge how much there should be. So we can't prevent someone from using it. They're also non-rival. One person's use doesn't preclude someone else's. Common resources are non-excludable, but they're rival in consumption. Natural monopolies or club goods, we use that term in here too, are excludable. You have to pay for it. And non-rival. Okay, so let's get some examples here. And I think there's some on the next slide, but just in case, let's go ahead and put some examples. So private goods, the goods that we've been studying, okay? Self-based masks. Anything you can kind of buy at the store there. Public goods. The pure public good is national defense. Now, we say it's national defense is the purest of all public goods. And the reason is you can't prevent somebody from getting national defense. They might be here legally or illegally. Everyone gets national defense. And simply because one person gets national defense doesn't mean that there's less to go around. Everybody still gets the same amount. Common resources, an example of a common resource would be deer, right? I see my deer nightly in my yard. So deer. Here, we can't really prevent someone from having deer in their yard. But if everyone hunts deer, it means there's less deer that people will enjoy, be it hunting or photography, what have you. Club goods, probably one of the best examples of club goods is electricity. And you're going to see in the Monopoly chapter, electric, let's do that. Okay. You're going to see in the Monopoly chapter why the government would make it inexcludable. So the government makes the excludability, but it's not rival in consumption. If I overuse electricity, it doesn't mean that there's less for you, unless we're in a brownout situation. That's a little bit different. Okay. Okay. So again, here's how we summarize these. And what we like to do is look at it in a graph situation. So we're going to ask, is it rival? Yes or no? Is it excludable? Yes or no? And then we classify these according to each. So private goods listed here, excludable and rival. Natural monopolies listed here. They are excludable but non-rival. Common resources are rival but non-excludable, and public goods are neither excludable nor rival. Notice an interesting one, that roads could be put into all 4 categories, and it kind of depends on, do you pay for it, a toll, that's the excludability piece, or is it congested, meaning high traffic. If it's congested, then those people that are on the road while you're trying to merge would take up your space, hence the term rival, or uncongested. Okay, which leads me to my next thing, which I was going to ask, and I should kind of like stole my own thunder, is a road is which kind of good? Well, I just told you on the previous one that a road is all four, okay? And again, it kind of depends on if it is congested or non-congested. Okay, that is all for Chapter 11, Objective 1. I'm going to see you back in Objective 2 where we explore public goods a little bit further. And then Objective 3, we're going to talk about common resources and the tragedy of the commons. We kind of wind the chapter up by looking at cost-benefit analysis. Okay, I'll see you back for Objective 2. Thank you.